Hello guys. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Abby, Abigail Grace. Feel free to call me whatever. But I am finally sitting down to film my 5-star reads of 2023 video. I've done this in the past, but I have read the most books that I've ever read in a year this year. And so this might be a little bit longer than normal, but my game plan is I have a list on my phone of all of the books that I read this year, all 175. And this camera battery is about to die. One second, let me get a new one. And move my cat. Okay, fresh battery acquired. Sitting back down. Can you see the Christmas tree? I'm gonna scoot over so you can see the tree a little bit, but as I was saying, I have a list of all 175 books that I read this year, and I'm just gonna scroll through all of them, and if I give it 5 stars, I'm gonna tell you what it is, who it's by, and maybe a brief synopsis. But I don't really feel like I will have time to fully dive into a lot of these books and why I loved them. So if there's a book that you're interested in learning more about, you should go to my Goodreads. I keep it updated, and I also have reading wrap-ups for every month if you feel like going back and watching them to see what I thought about the books that I read. But if not, let's dive in. The first 5-star book I read this year was From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. I think when I initially read this book, I gave it 4 stars, but as I continued to think about it and upon reflection, I realized it's 5 stars. Mariana Zapata is known for writing slow burns apparently. This is the only Mariana Zapata book that I have read, and I loved it. I will probably be rereading it, as I feel with most 5 stars. If I feel like I would reread that and still enjoy it, that's when I know I feel the blessing of the Goodreads gods to give it 5 stars, which is stupid, but there's lots of factors that go into making something 5 stars, and that is one of them. Next 5-star read that I read this year was Begin Again by Emma Lord, a YA rom-com that made me cry. There's a lot of really good lessons in this book, and I think for being a YA book, it is super well done. I think Emma Lord did a great job. Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second in the King of Scars duology. So it's set in the same universe, the Grishaverse, as Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows, and this follows Nikolai and his story kind of post events of both Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone. I think it was just a great conclusion to the universe, and it had all of the characters that I loved from those other series, and it was just great. The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. Lynn Painter is an auto-buy author for me. I will read whatever she puts out. This is one of her one of her adult romance books, and the FMC in this was just so spunky and fun, and I loved it. Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her last name, but that's how I'm saying it. This was kind of, I read this right after Funny You Should Ask, and they're both kind of randomly sexy, famous actor falls for normal woman, and there is nothing I love more than feeding that delusion that I will end up with a sexy actor. So, of course, I gave it 5 stars. Next 5-star read is Happy Place by Emily Henry. If you thought you could get by without me talking about an Emily Henry book in a 5-star reads video, you thought wrong. I also reread Book Lovers this year, and spoiler alert for later in the video, I gave it 5 stars. I just think she has a way of writing characters that feel like a part of me and I relate to so well, and I applaud her. She does such a good job. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Ali Hazelwood is another auto by author for me. I reread Love on the Brain this year, and if I'm rereading books by them, I know that I'm going to like the other books that they put out. Will they always be 5 stars? No. This one, something about how I know she did so much research for the STEM aspects of it, and how I kind of learned something, and I loved their relationship, and easily 5 stars for me. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and now I've read almost all of her back catalog because I discovered how much I love her from reading this book. It was a book of the month book, which I am now realizing if I pick a book of the month book that's a romance, I'm probably gonna give it 5 stars. A lot of the book of the month books that I pick that are romance end up being 4 or 5 stars. They know what they're doing over there at book of the month, because this one was really good. And I think Jacob is such a good MMC. The way she talks about his anxiety is so relatable and so well done. I applaud her. I think not just from a male perspective, but from a female perspective, it's so well done and shines such a great light on people that have anxiety and how it affects them in their day-to-day life. And I approve. I love Jacob, I love Brianna, but specifically him. And this story is so good. Better Than the Movies. I already talked about Lynn Painter. This was a reread. I've talked about it multiple times. It's always 5 stars. Red, White, and Royal Blue. Again, a reread. I read these for a video where I was rereading 5-star reads to see if they're still 5 stars. And this one still is. They also came out with the movie this year, and I think the movie did a pretty good job adaptation-wise. Obviously, it's not perfect. I like the book more, but I just love seeing those characters come to life on screen. But really, I love these characters, and I love to feed my delusion that I'm also going to end up with a prince. If I'm going to end up with a celebrity or a prince, I'm going to read it. I love that. I'm Delulu. Second Chance Summer by Morgan Matson. This was for that same video, that reread video. I forgot how good this book was until I reread it, and let me tell you, it did not disappoint. I know for a fact that it was so sad, and when I reread it, I went into it knowing I was going to cry. Of course, I bawled my eyes out. This is a YA romance. I don't want to say rom-com because the calm part of it is overshadowed by it's truly sad, and if you've lost a family member, maybe this isn't the book for you because it really talks about grief and loss of a family member, and it was a hard one. It was a hard one to get through, but it's still 5 stars. Another Lynn Painter book is on here, and that's The Do-Over. Again, I reread this one. This wasn't for that video. This was just because I was rereading books that I loved, and I was like, oh, I love that book. I want to reread it. All of Lynn Painter's YA rom-coms are 5 stars. It's so good. Truly, if there's one thing you get from this channel, maybe it should be to read Lynn Painter's YA rom-coms. I'm sure there's other things you could get from this channel, but that is definitely one of them you should glean. What Happens After Midnight by Kale Walter. Again, a YA rom-com. This time not by Lynn Painter, but still, I forget how much I love them. The chances of me rating like the chances of anyone rating like a smut book 5 stars, maybe people do. I don't. I devour those. I read them very quickly. But I forget how much I love a YA rom-com until I read one like What Happens After Midnight, and it makes me sad that I'm not 17 again, and I will never be 17 again, and I'm 23. Like, why did I have to grow up? It makes me miss my childhood. Don't get me wrong, I like the stage of my life that I'm at right now, but it makes me nostalgic for a time that I won't ever get to go back to. And I like to relive that. The Ballad of Never After. If you watch my book tag, I talked about how the last book in this trilogy was kind of disappointing to me. That being said, the second one in this trilogy, The Ballad of Never After, was very good. I remember I finished reading this. I was at Barnes & Noble in the cafe and I finished and I literally had to just stare off into space, like for minutes, 10 minutes before I could really wrap my head even a little bit around how this book ended. It was shocking, and I do think it was very good, despite the final book in the trilogy disappointing me a little bit. My next 5-star book is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a book that I've talked about many times on this channel also, about how if you're looking to get into fantasy, this is a great entrance into fantasy. It's very low stakes and it's super YA. There's no spice. The world building is minimal and it's easy to understand. And I think it's very well done, and I can't wait for the next one to come out in like a few weeks. Next, I have Curse of the Wolf King, which is the first book in the Entangled with Fae series, which I actually read all of them and they're all very good. But specifically the first one is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's a fantasy Beauty and the Beast retelling. Not that there isn't elements of fantasy already in Beauty and the Beast. Like there's magic elements, but it's even more fantasy entrenched. They're fae, some of them have powers. And there's a whole series with each book being a different fairy tale retelling, but they're all interconnected somehow, which I love to see how the different fairy tales Tassanja Odette, the author, has weaved together. And it's very good. And they're all on Kindle Unlimited. So if you're interested, you should definitely check that out. Next, we get into the phase where I start reading Throne of Glass. So, as I said, Entangled with Fae, all very good. I rated also the other book in that series, Heart of the Raven Prince, 5 stars, and a few other books, a few of the other ones 5 stars. So just know that's a 5-star series for me. And as I start talking about Throne of Glass, also know all of the books in Throne of Glass were either 4 or 5 stars. It's a 5-star series for me. It is so good. I'll talk about it till I'm blue in the face. And I probably will continue to talk about it till after I'm blue in the face. But the whole series, this was my first time reading it. My first time branching off of ACOTAR. I've obviously read other fantasy. I've mostly stuck to other YA fantasy. That's really what I grew up reading, was YA fantasy, and then I kind of moved into romance and was there for like a year and a half, almost exclusively reading romance. And then because I started reading Throne of Glass, I have a renewed vigor now for reading fantasy and realized how much I love it. So Throne of Glass, I read them with Assassin's Blade first, and then I tandem read Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. And that is how I would suggest doing it, because that's the only way that I know how to do it. Obviously, people read it all different ways. Feel free to read it however you want, but I liked reading the Assassin's Blade first. I also do recommend tandem reading. It is kind of annoying, but I do think it's worth it in the end. Needless to say, whole series, 5 stars. As I was saying, Throne of Glass really sparked my desire to read more fantasy, and the next fantasy series that I got into was The Prison Healer. The first 2 were 4 stars, but the last one is my next 5-star read, The Blood Trader, which, as I said, is the final book in the Prison Healer trilogy. The characters are everything in this series. There's such a good found family element that I cannot stress enough is so good. The series is amazing. If you're, again, it's YA fantasy, so it's easy to get into. I think the world building is easy to understand, and I recommend if you have maybe read other YA fantasy, check this one out. Next 5-star was 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder probably a year and a half ago now and loved it. Have had 5 Survive on my shelf for probably a year after I finished A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and for some reason I didn't read it until now because I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it. Of course you're gonna like it. Holly Jackson is an amazing author. It's so good. And if you're into mystery thriller, you definitely should read it. You should read all of Holly Jackson's, but especially that, because it's a standalone. And sometimes it's hard to get into a whole series, but if you want a standalone, read that one. The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I reread this one this year. I knew it was 5 stars then, it's 5 stars now. She does a great job. 10 out of 10 for Catherine Center. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. 5 stars. Obviously, that's what this video is. I'm talking about 5-star reads. I've talked about that book a ton. I did a whole full spoilers reading vlog for Iron Flame. So if you are interested, if you've read Fourth Wing and you've read Iron Flame, go watch that video, because one, I spent a lot of time on it and I would love for you to enjoy it. It's long. It's like a movie length, not movie length. It's almost an hour long. So put it on while you're cleaning and remind yourself about it. I don't know, but you should definitely watch that video. So needless to say, Fourth Wing, 5 stars. My next 5-star read was The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I read this for book club and was shocked. Maybe not shocked, but sometimes book club books, you just assume it's like, okay, I'm gonna read this. It's not gonna be my favorite, but I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna talk about it, because that's what you do for book club. This book was unexpected, and yet I absolutely loved it. There was a little bit of some suspension of disbelief when it came to the main character. She was a little bit naive for some things, but despite that, I loved it, and it's very well done. I can't wait to read more from Meg Schaefer. This was her debut novel. It was another book of the month book, and I can't wait to see more. Iron Flame was my next 5-star read. Obviously, I just talked about it. I did a whole video. I don't want to talk anymore about it. Well, I do want to talk more about it. I've talked about it ad nauseum. So just know it's 5 stars. As I mentioned previously, when I was talking about Happy Place, I reread Book Lovers this year, and that's my next 5-star read. This book makes me want to hug my sister. I love the sister relationship in this book and how it's portrayed, and I live with my sister currently, if you don't know that, but I know our time is limited because she's gonna move out in like 6 months. So rereading this really brought up a lot of feelings about being really close with your sister, but also having to move to the next stage of your life, whatever that may be. And it's hard, but it's good. And I think Emily did such a great job. I love this book. I don't want to say it's my favorite, because truly every time I read a book, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite Emily Henry book. Oh no, this is my favorite Emily Henry book. It's really just depends on which one I read most recently. So currently it's Book Lovers, but when I reread Beach Read, I'm gonna be like, oh, you're right. This is my favorite. And it's just an endless cycle. Next, the next 2 5-star reads are House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath, which I also read for a video. So if you haven't seen that video, go watch it, because it's spoiler free. So if you haven't read, you can still watch that video and find out kind of what it's about without getting anything spoiled. I cannot wait until January when this book 3 comes out. The end of book 2 was shocking. I literally texted my friend that had just read it and I was like, WTF? What just happened? She said, I know, can't wait till January. And that is all I have to say. Watch my other video if you want more information about those. And next I have Obsidian Throne, which is the 4th in a series, the Lachlan Feuds. I talked about these in a TikTok and on my book Instagram recently. So if you don't follow me on either of those, they're always linked down below. You should definitely check them out, because I talked about why I love them and all that jazz. but it's kind of giving Outlander and Brave, like the Disney animated movie Brave. The FMC, Rowan, is Merida, and it's a fantasy, it's light fantasy, kind of how Outlander is a fantasy as well. It's 5 stars. Powerless by Lauren Roberts, another YA fantasy that I immediately became obsessed with. This is the first in a series, and it's also the only one that is released. The next one does not come out until July, so I am not so patiently waiting for book 2 to come out. And I know Lauren kind of blew up on TikTok over quarantine because she was writing the book in 2020, and she talked about it a lot on TikTok, and that's kind of how she like got the book out there. She originally published it independently and then got picked up and is now with a publisher. I'm very excited for her. I can't wait to see where the series goes. Again, the banter in that book is 20 out of 10. It's so good. I'm going to include this in here because it's on my Goodreads. It's not real, it's a book, but it's a fan fiction, and that is Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. There's not much to say. It's a Hermione fanfic, and it's post-war with Voldemort. Draco is an Auror, and Hermione is very smart. She's a scientist, she's a doctor, and he's tasked with protecting her because something she's working on has the potential to be very dangerous for her. And so while he's protecting her, they kind of form a friendship and eventually fall in love. I love Hermione. I think Harry and Ron are useless. Could do without them, honestly. Betting on You by Lynn Painter, I already said. I've talked about Lynn Painter multiple times in this video. Betting on You is her new release. It just came out in November, and I highly recommend. Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. I read this twice this year, and I can say fully it's very good. It's still 5 stars. It's accidental pregnancy, but I think it's accidental pregnancy done right and done well. But if you don't like that, don't read it. I saw a singular TikTok about it and was instantly like, I need to read it. I love Beau. He's the MMC. The way he cares for Wynn is truly top tier. The book was sexy and I loved the relationship. It was everything. And finally, the last 5-star book that I read this year, although I still have another week of the year left, so who knows, maybe I'll find another 5-star read. But as of this point in the year, the last 5-star book that I read was This Spells Love by Katie Robb. This is her debut novel. It was, again, a book of the month pick for November, and I'm so glad I picked it. I thought it was going to be a lot more witchy because there's a spell. This spells love. Like, the premise is that she does a spell because she wants to forget her ex, but in forgetting her ex, she also wakes up in a world where her best friend doesn't know who she is, and she's trying to fix it. But it's not really witchy. It is not Halloween themed. It's just kind of, she does the spell and that's it. It's set during the summer, I believe. It's set in Canada. I thought it was so sweet and so good. And if that's not another reason to get Book of the Month, I don't know what is. This is not an ad for Book of the Month, but it would have been well integrated if it was. So that being said, Book of the Month, if you want to sponsor me, please do, because clearly I read your books and I like them. But that, as I said, was the last 5-star read that I read as of December 20th, 2023. Thank you so much for following my reading journey this year. As I said somewhere in this video, my reading genre, style, everything. A lot has changed in a year. A lot has changed in 2 years. The reader I was at the beginning of the year is much different than the reader that I am now. I still love a good romance. I still love a good sexy smut. I still love a lot of the things that I loved, but I feel like I'm branching out. I'm reading different things. I'm reading new things. And if you watched my book tag, you'll know I have some fun goals and exciting aspirations for what I want to read in 2024. So if you have not watched that video, go watch it. I talk a lot about different books that I don't always talk about. And I talked about my reading goals for the next year. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.